Please welcome Guro and Eirik from Norway, from Oslo, from ERA Strategic Innovation. Who of you likes the idea of eternal growth, and do we really believe that helps us to survive as mankind? Is it a good idea? Okay, good. And I hope that finally we get the answer from your talk, how to make it work, because this might be upon the biggest challenges of mankind. How can we reduce the carbon? We don't have much time. How can we make everything more sustainable? And the talk is all about regenerative leadership. So this is the practice of relational, organizational, and business development, where the aim is always to leave everything better than you found it, and I like that. Shouldn't we all do that? So welcome, and give a warm welcome to Guro and Eirik.
Thank you. Is there a sound? Yeah. Thank you for the introduction. It's a very big topic for half an hour, and quite a big topic for kind of the final stage of this session as well. But we'll try to answer some of the questions. I can't promise we'll answer all. But I think maybe first of all, we should all take it kind of a deep breath, as Guro is changing roles from our brilliant moderator to my colleague. So you have to kind of reset a bit into this. And I think we'll try to reset a bit into this as well, talking about regenerative leadership. It's a very big topic. It's a bit of a hype, and probably something that no one really knows how it will develop. But we'll try to dwell into it with two aspects: a personal aspect of it, how do we do that as leaders at an individual level, as well as a systems perspective. So coming a bit back to your talk as well, but from a completely different angle, I assume less data-driven as well, more design-driven, so more about big organizations and how they can work together in creating this change. So we started ERA 7 years ago with the intent that if we are to create this change that we need, if we are to create a more sustainable world, big organizations have to be an important part of that change. They have to change, because we can do a lot at the smaller level, but big organizations have to change if we are to make this fast enough. And the bad news is really that it's not happening fast enough, so I suppose we haven't really done our job, but there is a lot going on. And one of the things that we've also got in 2015, around the time when we started, were the Sustainable Development Goals. So you saw a different perspective on that earlier on today. We rather like this one from the Stockholm Resilience Center, because it divides into this basis that we are dependent on. So basically the nature and the natural system that we are all dependent on. Then the social aspects that need to work, and they also need to work in this transition that we are in the middle of, and we need to build an economy on the top of that supporting all of this, and we have to work together, obviously, to get that to play. So I think this is a nice figure. Since then, there's been a lot of work, as some of you might be aware as well, and you can kind of see the ESG in this, of the environmental, social, and governance structure that is used in reporting. The EU is doing huge work on the taxonomy, defining what is sustainable, both within the climate, from a climate perspective, but also from a nature perspective. So there's a lot of things happening there. We will not go into this. I can talk about that for a long time. Since we are here as Norwegians, we thought we also kind of need to present one of these definitions on sustainability that is still working quite well. This is our former Prime Minister. She was actually recently also elected into the City Hall of Oslo at an age of 85, but she's called Guro Brundtland. She headed the Brundtland Commission in 1987. So this is a rather old definition of sustainability, saying that sustainable development is to meet the needs of present without compromising the needs of future generation. And as a definition, it's still very useful, but it's obviously quite wide and tricky to use. But there is this development in this, and also in the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think we will dwell into this development aspect of sustainability. How do we create sustainability, or how do we go beyond sustainability? And one premise that we just need to establish, we talked about that yesterday a bit as well, but I want to repeat it because it's really important, is that this future, and also definitely not the sustainable future, it doesn't exist. It is continuously created, and it is created by us. And this seems very obvious when we see it like that, but it's more fundamental than I think most people kind of think at the first glance. Because it's very easy when we talk about the future as a company or as an organization to think about it as kind of a room that we're stepping into, and then we have to find our place in this future. But obviously that's not how it works. It's a very dynamic system, and it's continuously changing. So our actions are changing that future, and we need to believe that we can change that future as well. And I'm a bit new to the whole language of edgy and everything, but it seems that this is also a great language to kind of model those transitions. And I talked a bit to Eirik about that as well, what has to happen at different levels of the organization in creating this future. So moving from sustainability then to regeneration, why do we want to talk about regenerative leadership? And this guy kind of coined a lot of those terms, and he also talks about this opportunity that lies in regeneration. And I think that's one important aspect why we should talk about regeneration. Sustainability is kind of achieving a balance. Regeneration is going beyond that and also creating new opportunities. He also said that regenerative practices by default lead to sustainable outcomes. So for aiming for regenerative economy, for instance, we can kind of assume that we will at least achieve sustainability. We can also think about it like this. We have depleted nature or Earth quite a bit. We've basically done a lot of damage, and we have to repair that as well. So going just to sustainable or going to like net zero is often mentioned, one important aspect, obviously, of this transition, but it's by far not enough. So going there is not enough. We need to kind of go beyond that, and we have to repair the damage that we've done, and we have to establish new systems that actually do that. And then there are some principles on regeneration and a regenerative economy. But that being said, no one knows what this looks like. There are no, at least as far as I know, so I would be glad to discuss any examples where this is kind of set into practice. There are some aspects in food production and in farming and so on, and that's also where it comes from. But like a regenerative economy, we have absolutely no idea what that looks like. That's the bad message. But we can work at exploring it, and we are working at exploring it at different levels. So the key point here is really just that these principles for a regenerative economy are based on kind of biomimicry, trying to mimic how can we create an economic system that mimics how Earth as an ecosystem functions. So we'll talk about that at two levels, the individual level, as well at the systemic level. And I know that's a bit rude, since the level in the middle is actually the topic of this year's conference. But we would like to propose that we come back next year and maybe talk more about that. So how can we transition organizations as well? So over to Guro, who will cover the individual aspect of this change.
Thank you. It's not an advertisement for Norway, even though it could be. But I want to share with you 3 stories about my first real encounters of what regeneration can mean on an individual level. This is me and 20 strangers getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning after having spent 12 hours of silence together. It was a part of a program where we all came in wanting to learn and develop our skills within regenerative leadership. I had no clue what I was doing, to be quite honest. I don't really enjoy getting up that early, and hiking is a part of the Norwegian culture, but this was almost a little bit extreme to me. We know we're going to go up there. We are in silence because the reason for us holding our words back was because we wanted to invest in introspection. Understanding what is it about me that's holding me back? What is it about my leadership that is not serving me anymore? And we had 12 hours in silence to reflect on that. We got up early and we all brought these logs. We held them in our hand as we made our way up. And those logs, we were asked to charge with the thing we wanted to get rid of, our sacrifice, what we had observed about ourselves that was no longer helping us be the leaders we wanted to be. And we walk, and as nature does, patterns emerge organically. One group goes here, another group goes there. And the only reason for that happening is because someone took charge. Someone decided to be the person taking the first step and taking risk and finding route, leading the way. Another part of the group decided to follow. I followed. And we took a detour, which I was convinced was going to make us slower than the rest. And I was like, fuck. I wanted to get up quickly. I wanted to be there. I wanted to celebrate my achievement when I got up. And we did get up as the first group. But it wasn't a celebration in the masculine form and not gender-based, but like me being, or maybe it's more correct to say like being an ego celebration. I did this because it was such a true expression of we doing this, us doing this. We made that happen as a group. And when we got up there, we broke silence as we each put our logs on the fire, sharing what it is we want to let go of. And those are big things, and those are small things. But we gathered in a circle. It was freezing cold, but we were able to create warmth from the fire and warmth in the support of each other, celebrating us letting go with the intention of improvement, with the intention of getting back to who we would like to be. And I really didn't think I would be at a conference sharing a bikini picture of myself, but here we are. And this is to say, we also worked somatically with exposing ourselves to shocks to the system to create deeper awareness about who we are as individuals, as leaders. So, raise of hands if you ice bathe, then you know all about it. This was my first time. 2 guys go before me, 2 guys in their 50s. They jump in, after 20 seconds, they squeamishly jump out and be like, ooh, this was very cold. I'm like, yeah, it's really cold. I go in, I sit there with my friend Katinka for 3 minutes and 30 seconds. We exit, and I'm just feeling like yes! I made it. I was feeling like I won the competition. And I was feeling really proud of myself. Until I realized that this was me being confronted with how important it is to be a winner. Like the story of me wanting to be better than the rest. And it made me also wonder, here I am enduring this pain, eating in all these quite uncomfortable somatic feelings, and just taking it, enduring it. And it made me wonder, holy shit, this is why I've been stuck in relationships that aren't good for me, because I've become so good at just taking it without saying, this is my line, and you don't get to cross it. Because in my identity as a leader, I thought it was good to just endure because my job was to be there for everyone else. So this ice bathe and this plunge really made me question my identity as a leader, and made me question, where is my boundaries drawn, and how am I even aware of them? Or maybe that is what got me into the situation to begin with. And so these are just illustrations to try to capture some of what I think is essential in regenerative leadership on an individual basis. If we are able to create space where we can truly hold each other, where you can come in and share your intelligence, share your vulnerability, that's the heart of creativity and connection. That is essential in the toolbox of regenerative leadership. Designing for circulation. So it means deliberately letting go of the things that aren't serving you to make space, make room for new wisdom, new knowledge, new ideas to support you is super, super critical. Create time for contemplation, not worrying about silence, but actually allowing silence as a source of creativity and innovation. I'm terrified of silence. So this is an experiment for me to try to challenge myself. This leads to connection because all of these things invites us to be our authentic selves when we meet our teams, when we meet our clients, when we meet ourselves. And when we scale this up, it becomes a community where I do think we can anticipate better relationships, better organizations, better products and services, and better systems. And maybe more of this too. Like, look at these words: heals, repair, new, vitality. Is this a part of our working life today? I know I'm longing for more of this in my working life. Opa. Did I go too far? I want more of this. And it's a beautiful quote from the regenerative thought leader, Laura Storm. Our current economic system is degenerative and extractive. It steals the future. A regeneratively designed system heals the future, whereas sustainability comes from the Latin sistern, meaning to maintain. Regeneration means to repair or renew. Regeneration brings vitality and renewed growth to our communities and to our ecosystems. It puts life and connection at the center of every decision we make. And this, I find, is worth reaching for and stretching for in our businesses. Eirik will talk more about these things in context, so I will actually just say that we know where we're coming from. This is the industrial model that has architected our modern society, our modern organizations as we know them today. We think by fixing the bad we've done over here, we'll be okay. Resting in sustainability. But that will only sustain the status quo that is causing all the climate issues, and I say that in a broad sense, that we're experiencing today. And lastly, that means we need to be reaching for regeneration, reaching for that Northern Star that is more ambitious, more natural, more organic than more of the engineered interactions that we're doing over here. It's happening already. Inner sustainability is on the rise as a brand new concept, gaining traction in organization, and I think it's a wonderful sign that we're now seeing inner sustainability directly connected to outer sustainability. And we know it's exhausting. Like, when we don't have these things, it feels terrible. When we are in negative relationships, or we're struggling, or we are frustrated and we're blocked, it feels terrible. And I want more people to feel great about the work they're doing, and that's one of the things I'm fighting for.
Thank you, Guro. So that's the personal perspective on this, and I think, at least to me as well, one important aspect of this, I have been ice bathing actually, but I haven't been doing it in that context, but is in creating this transformation and this big change that we need, it will demand a lot of us, and it will demand a lot of our whole social system. So rethinking that and exploring that as individuals as well, I truly think is very important. But then we also have, maybe not, well, I suppose a bigger problem as well at the systems level, because all the systems, however we think about our systems as value chains or parts of society, or maybe society as a whole, there's a lot of things we need to do quite differently there as well. So how can we approach change there? And again, how can we go beyond sustainability at this scale, to use that word? And just to repeat, one of my key points is that we really don't know what this looks like, but we know how we can start exploring what it might look like. So these regenerative systems, I think one aspect to be very much aware of is kind of the different paces that this change happens at. And I think yesterday someone talked about kind of the fashions as well and kind of these quick trends that are happening. And I mean, they are happening all the time and they kind of blind us. It was the topic of the talk this morning as well. So it's difficult to kind of see the bigger change. But some of these trends and fashion, they kind of sip through and they become part of our culture. Like think about some of the ideas coming out of this university, for instance, a very good example of that, very much part of the system that we are currently in. But if we are to change the system, we can't get too blinded about these fashions. So we need to kind of divide, we need a language to think about the system at different level, and this is a model that we use. Thinking about these kind of big, the big challenges, the big topics that we have to solve. Some people talk about the, what is it called, mission design? Yeah, I forgot the name of this Italian economist who kind of coined that. But these big missions that we basically have to achieve as humanity and break them down into systems changes. And then from that, we can start working on creating these solutions that we need. And this is obviously an interplay, but we have to go up and down in order to create concrete enough solutions to show what this future might look like, to show at least some aspects of this future that we want to create and start experimenting with that future. So creating these kind of, I like the expression pockets of the future, these small moments, maybe these small examples of how we organize things, how we do things, how we deliver services and so on, that kind of prove what the future might look like. And we need to put that into this system context in order to see the whole picture as well. So this going up and down in this model from these grand challenges through the view and a perspective on the system and also an opinion on what this system should be like is quite crucial in order to create the right pockets of the future showing the way. When we talk to politicians as well, they are quite keen on this because they need the examples. If we are to make new regulations, we need to make the examples first. It's very difficult to make regulations for a future we don't know what looks like. So if we can create these pockets of a future, we can also start changing the political system and so on. We can also think about it as this. There is a big regime that we need to change. So we need to have these niche initiatives that are slowly replacing the old one. We can use this, and we could speak a lot about change theory here, and a lot of this comes from kind of how observing how societies change. We don't know a lot about how we can actually make that change. So this is very much kind of also an ongoing academic discussion. And then we need these transitions that we are working on in some of, well, let's not go there. I could talk about that forever. Because I think a lot of the things that we look at greenwashing, that's one way to think of it, to think about these transitions. Some of these transitions we need, some of them are definitely just derailing the whole project that we're at. So to close off with one more concrete example of how we can work with this systems change, we run a project that we call Floke in Norwegian. Floke is, I think the English word is a tangle, so a very complicated knot, basically. So if you have ever been fishing, for instance, and you have this fishing rod all tossed up together, you know that if you start pulling very hard at one end, that definitely doesn't solve the problem. You have to kind of fickle at different things. So it's basically also the same thing that many people talk about as wicked problems. It's complex, and we have to look for different solutions, and we have to bring, in this context, different actors together as well. So we have a design. In basis, it's a design process to approach this, where we put together actors across a value chain or around a societal problem to work through a structured innovation process in order to find these different solutions. So in order to start untangling this kind of problem, looking for their pockets of future. And the reason why this needs to be multi-stakeholder in our perspective might be obvious to everyone, but is that we need new kind of collaborations. So maybe they're not in the current value chain, maybe there are new collaborations in the value chain, for instance, for this to happen. We've done that 11 times, and this is not really to prove that we know that it works, because we probably don't yet. It's a very kind of long-term change we're after. But we have tried it on different kind and different subsets of these great challenges that we are facing. So everything from single plastic to the construction industry, to social exclusion, to forestry, which is quite big in Norway, obviously, and people like to go outdoor, but that also diminishes the value of nature over time. And it takes then on different valor based on the problem. So we worked, for instance, on circular cleanup. How can we get all the plastic that is in the ocean? How can we kind of clean up the oceans in order to return them to better and functioning ecosystems, developing strategies for that? And the Norwegian Shipping Association was spearheading that project together with a lot of other actors. We looked at the food system, which is immensely complex and also very, very political. When we started working on this, we tried to call it the meat tangle. I don't know if that translates, but basically the meat problem. That obviously meant that a lot of people wouldn't even get in the room, let's say, put it like that. So we had to change the name to What Will We Eat Tomorrow, which is more open, and then meat could be a part of that. But obviously it gets very political. Food is very political, but it also, at least in Norway, it goes very much into regional politics and so on. So it's a very complicated thing, starting this discussion on what will our future food system look like. And we've been working on the construction industry, coming back to the topic of this morning of circularity as well. If we are to transform the construction industry, which is also known as the 40% industry, since it has this huge footprint, it's an immense footprint from the construction industry. If we are to change that from today's business models, and there are several business models, if you think about the complexity of a construction project, and we are to change that into a circular value chain, there are actually loads of small circular value chains in that we need to work and that we need to experiment with, and that require completely new forms of collaboration and so on. And which also means a shift of power in the industry. So it's quite complicated. We work with this in 2 seasons, and it's a lot happening here as well, but establishing this arena for collaboration we think is quite important in order to create these pockets of future, and again moving toward hopefully a regenerative future. So this is to close up, having not answered, for instance, we haven't touched on the topic of growth. You mentioned the topic of growth. We often say that we're growth agnostic, just to take that off the table for now, because touching on the topic of growth is it's very tricky when you work with different kind of actors in a system. So having an agnostic perspective is just very pragmatic in the beginning. But I think if we get all these actors in the room and get them to agree that we can create this future and that we have to work together to do that, we can also accept these different perspectives. We have had a lot of arguments in this project, obviously, but we've also always landed in a solution strategy and some concrete projects that are implemented across organizations, creating these pockets of future. So I think we'll just leave it at this list, which sums up some of the big shifts that we have to explore, both as individuals, as organizations, and also at the system level. And now I'm not quite sure if you're the moderator again, or if you're my colleague Guro.
I'm the moderator.
No, I would love to stay in colleague mode for a bit longer, and to say, if we don't reach for regeneration as an aspirational northern star, we're quickly going to realize that sustainability in and of itself won't be enough. And investigating some of these macro shifts, I hope will inspire both us as leaders on an individual level, us as business owners and parts of change processes in large enterprises, to maybe reach beyond sustainability. So thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. You haven't answered all the questions, but maybe you can answer a couple of questions from our audience here. So who wants to ask a question?
Thank you. Amazing talk. And I was going to say something similar to what you just said, which is, I fear if we just stick at sustainability, we're almost kind of kidding ourselves. We can try and make the current system slightly tweaked and sustain what we have today, slightly, clean up around the edges. So I really like what you were saying around really striving for regenerative, but I don't think you can dance around the growth thing. I think that's something you're going to have to face into a bit more. It's political, don't get me wrong, and I know Wolfgang and I and others on LinkedIn have discussions about this all the time, but I do think that is something fundamental. That's like, it's a bit like the futures we were talking about yesterday. That's like one of the future things we're going to need to face into, I think.
But I completely agree, and on a personal note, I would say that it is obvious that we need to be dismantling the notion of eternal growth, like the capitalist notion of like that's the ultimate goal for individuals and companies, because we're learning that that is part of what is driving our systems into disarray and our planet into disarray. So I think questioning that, looking for better ways, investigating what good alternatives could there be to eternal growth, and investigating what's enough for all the actors in this ecosystem to thrive. What does that look like? And you're right, we don't have the answers to that, but we need to look into it by simulating, by creatively inventing futures to be able to create them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think maybe it's maturing as well. So maybe, I don't know, in a year's time or two, we will not be growth agnostic because we dare not to be. But I also think there are so many aspects of that. Like we tried to do one of these projects on consumption. Try going there with a retailer, for instance. Someone talked about Apple. You talked about Apple yesterday and how they're driving these kind of fast-pacing changes. It's really tricky to talk about it. We also tried to start something on the financial system, and which comes down then again to consumption and how we do things and how we organize the whole system. And it's at least for us, it's very difficult to kind of find an angle there where we get the participants on board. But I agree with the basic concept, yeah. That is the big problem, and it's kind of the elephant in the room, I assume.
Okay, some more questions?
It's late in the day. I get it.
I mean, one of the speakers yesterday touched upon it, and I think when you and I spoke, you said some word in your question this morning is sort of how do you frame the future? I think that is really, you need to do that in a, I don't know, in a way so that people actually move themselves there. I mean, what are any tricks, and how do you get the, I don't know, Norwegian building industry to think 2080 or something? I don't know how. Any?
Yeah. I'll give you a magic trick, which we use. It's actually one of the slides that we always use, but we skipped it for now since we had quite a big topic. But I think we can say that an organization has two tasks, right? It's to do what they do, and they do that more efficiently. That was a lot of the topic yesterday went into that. So doing that more efficiently. And organizations are very good at that, and they're basically created in order to do that. But they also have the task of creating the future. And we can work as disciplined with that as we can with sustaining and kind of doing what we are. And we have to work with sustainability or maybe regeneration on both tracks as well. So what we always start our projects with, and also these systemic projects, is to establish that as the metaphor. So this kind of the train as the organization that goes on the tracks that it has, and then the track to depicted by a rocket person. We are not supposed to say man. I always get arrested on that, but the rocket person exploring the future. And we need to do that as organizations as well. And the reason, and then coming back to growth, and this is where it gets tricky, is to evolve as organizations and secure the future of the organization. So an organization always has to do these things, but you have to work with them in very different ways. And you have to kind of separate the two tracks when you're working on that. So for all our clients, when they go into these Tangle or Floke projects, we establish it very clearly as a track 2 project. And that's what we do there. So it's not supposed to kind of influence today's business as of now, but obviously we know that all the discussions that they have will. So yeah.
Okay, I think we are all up for some coffee break. So please have a drink. Usually that's what you say after that. That's doing.
You should do it.
Yeah. So there's some coffee and refreshments, and please come back at 3 o'clock prompt, because then we will have the final closing keynote by Roger Bolton. So be here at 3 to not miss it.